Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother and sister, welcome back to Islamic Notes channel. Behind her neat uniform and charming face, Lieutenant Lin Meiying was known as one of the most brilliant policewomen in Beijing. Her beautiful features, strong posture, and intelligence earned her the respect of many. She graduated top of the police academy and had been trusted to handle numerous high-profile cases. However, none of her colleagues knew that deep down, Meiying was harboring a profound secret, one that would change the course of her life. It all began on a diplomatic assignment to Xinjiang, a province in western China, where the majority of the population is Uighur Muslims. Meiying initially arrived with great caution, armed with many negative stereotypes about Islam and its people. However, what she saw firsthand was far different. The simplicity, politeness, and devotion of the Uighur people touched her conscience. She was amazed to see children memorizing the Quran in melodious voices. She was moved to tears when she witnessed an elderly woman prostrating herself in the cold night for the tahajjud prayer. She felt calm as the call to prayer echoed through the small villages she visited. It touched the deepest part of her soul. At that moment, a question began to grow. What is the secret to their peace? After returning from her assignment in Xinjiang, Meiying began to learn about Islam, quietly. She couldn't do so openly because her surroundings were highly sensitive to religion. She downloaded a Mandarin translation of the Quran app, watched videos of lectures by international scholars, and even joined online discussions with Chinese Muslims using an anonymous account. Her days were filled with feelings of emotion and awe. She began to understand the concept of monotheism, admired the morals of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and fell in love with the beauty of Islam, which upholds justice, compassion, and equality. Every night she cried as she recited the touching Islamic prayers. She felt as if she had found the spiritual home she had been searching for. One night at exactly 3 a.m., Meiying sat in the corner of her room. With tears streaming down her face in a trembling heart, she recited the 2 sentences of the Shahada in Mandarin, then in Arabic. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. At that moment, no one was there to witness it. There was no imam, no congregation, just her and her God. But for Meiying, it was the most important moment of her life. She had become a Muslim. Becoming a Muslim secretly in a hostile environment wasn't easy. Meiying had to learn to pray in secret. She printed prayer sheets and hid them among stacks of books. She wore a hijab only when alone in her room, savoring its beauty, even if only for a moment. When Ramadan arrived, she fasted while still carrying out field service. She endured hunger and thirst in the city heat, but her heart was full of enthusiasm. Every night she broke her fast with a sip of water and a date she ordered online, while reciting silent prayers. The only place she felt free was online. There she met a secret community of Muslim women from various cities in China. With them, she learned more about Islam, sharing stories and encouraging each other. However, a storm arose when her brother accidentally caught Meiying praying. At first there was silence. Then sharp questions, anger, and disappointment erupted from her family. Her father, a retired soldier, was deeply nationalistic and considered Islam a foreign religion. Her mother cried all night, believing Meiying had been incited. Why are you destroying your own future? Her mother asked, her voice trembling. Meiying could only reply softly, Mom, I just found my future. Evicted from home, Meiying had to live alone, but she remained strong. She rented a small room on the outskirts of town and worked part-time, as her police job began to be shaken by rumors that she had changed her ideology. Although life became increasingly difficult, Meiying felt a peace she had never experienced before. She could pray without hiding, wear a hijab when leaving the house, and became more open with the local Muslim community, which was slowly beginning to accept her. One day, a preacher from Malaysia living in China heard Meiying's story. He invited her to a humanitarian program and introduced her to many Muslims from abroad. From there, Meiying was given the opportunity to study in the Middle East on a scholarship, deepening her religious knowledge at an Islamic university in Qatar. There, she blogged about her journey as a Chinese convert, and her story spread widely. Many Muslims from around the world offered moral and material support. She was no longer alone. After taking the Shahada and living alone away from her family, Maryam Lin began to establish a new routine. Her days were filled with Quran recitations, night prayers, and reading books on Islamic history. She lived very simply, eating only the bare necessities and renting a tiny room, no more than 10 square meters. But precisely in that simplicity, she felt a sense of spaciousness she had never known before. I used to have everything: position, money, honor. But my heart was empty, she wrote in her journal. Now I have nothing, but my heart is full. In the darkness of the night, she often cried, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. She felt God so close. Every time she prostrated herself, she felt as if she were speaking directly to the God she had been searching for. She began a personal blog in Mandarin under the pseudonym Light in the West, where she poured out her feelings and shared Islamic values with readers curious about the beauty of this religion. After several months of living as a Muslim woman in secret, Maryam Lin plucked up the courage to wear a hijab when leaving the house. It wasn't without risk. In a big city like Beijing, a woman with such an appearance could immediately attract attention. However, for her, the hijab was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a flag, a protection, and a reminder of the commitment she had made before Allah. The first day she wore the hijab in public, Maryam felt incredibly tense. People's stares pierced her like arrows. A mother pulled her child away when she saw her at the train station. Some people cursed her under their breath, calling her a cultural traitor. But Maryam continued walking, her head bowed, holding back tears and silently reciting a prayer. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is sufficient for us and the best of protectors. Though difficult, that day was a great spiritual victory for her. She had stood before the world with her new identity. She was no longer hiding. One day through her blog, Maryam received an invitation from a Uighur Muslim woman, an indigenous Muslim ethnic group in China, who ran a small congregation in Xinjiang. With a mixture of trepidation and emotion, Maryam attended the meeting. There, for the first time, she prayed in congregation with fellow Muslim women. She couldn't hold back her tears when the first takbir was recited. She felt like she was home. She felt like she was among family, even though they weren't related by blood. From then on, she regularly attended religious studies, studying women's jurisprudence, fiqh, Quranic interpretation, and deepening her Arabic. She also began actively teaching Mandarin to Muslim children in small mosques. In her isolation, Maryam discovered the true meaning of Islamic brotherhood. One night during Ramadan, as Maryam was preparing iftar, her cell phone rang. It was a familiar number, her mother's. Her hands trembled. Since being kicked out, her family hadn't contacted her. In a soft voice, she answered, "Hello?" From the other end, she heard her mother's deep, sobbing voice. "Meiying, are you okay?" Maryam burst into tears. She couldn't say anything except, "I miss you, Mom." That conversation marked the beginning of a reconnection with her family. It took months for her mother to finally agree to meet. During their first meeting, her mother cried when she saw Maryam wearing a hijab and said, "You look calmer now. You're not the same Meiying. You look peaceful." Her father remained cold and had not yet accepted her conversion to Islam, but Maryam didn't respond with anger. She chose to demonstrate her morals. She cared for her mother when she was sick, helped her father secretly, and continued to send small gifts. Gradually, Maryam's gentle and patient behavior won her parents' hearts. Although she hadn't yet converted to Islam, they began to respect her choice and asked her to return home for Chinese New Year. The story of Maryam's struggle eventually reached the ears of a Muslim lecturer from Qatar who was conducting research in China. Impressed by her writings, he contacted her and invited her to be a guest speaker at a Muslim youth conference in Doha. For Maryam, this was her first time outside her home country. Upon her arrival in Qatar, she was warmly welcomed by the international community. There, she met religious scholars, Muslim activists, and converts from various countries. She felt like a small bird finally finding a wide sky to fly freely. In a discussion session, Maryam delivered a speech with a trembling voice. "Islam entered my heart not through debate, not through force, but through example, gentleness, and compassion. Now my duty is to spread that light, no matter how small. Her words went viral on Muslim social media, and since then, Meiying has been invited to various forums as a representative of Chinese Muslim women. After Lin embraced Islam, her entire life changed. She used to wake up early for state duties in her position, but now she woke up early to pray at night and pray munajat prayer. She used to stand firmly in the ranks of the police, but now she stood devoutly in the prayer lines. Her life shifted from the glitz of this world to the tranquility of the afterlife. However, this drastic change wasn't entirely easy. Shortly after she began wearing the hijab openly, news reached her superiors. Within a short time, Meiying was summoned by the commander. The atmosphere in the meeting room was tense. She was asked to explain the reasons for her drastic change in appearance and thinking. Calmly, Meiying replied, "I have found a faith that allows me to live more honestly and peacefully. I am still a good citizen. Only now I also want to be a good servant of God." However, in a system rigid and suspicious of ideological change, this statement was perceived as a threat. Within days, Meiying was officially removed from her rank as lieutenant. Her reputation was tarnished, and her colleagues slowly drifted away. Some even openly mocked or insulted her harshly. She lost her salary, pension, and all her civil service rights. The world seemed to collapse, but she had no regrets. In her prayers, she said, "O Allah, if losing this world is the price to gain you, then I am willing." With her remaining savings, Meiying moved to a small town in southern China that was more welcoming to the Muslim minority. She rented a room above a bakery owned by a friendly Hui family. In her new town, she started from scratch. She began teaching private English and Mandarin lessons to children. In her spare time, she created simple Islamic preaching content on social media. No face, just her voice and writing. She spoke about Islamic values, about peace, and about the beauty of prayer and supplication. At first, only a handful watched, but gradually many young non-Muslims became interested. Some even contacted her secretly, wanting to learn more about Islam. Meiying never claimed to be a religious teacher or a preacher. She simply said, "I'm nobody. I'm just an ordinary woman who wants to share the light I once found in the darkness." Even though she was starting to recover, loneliness still often plagued her. Meiying lived far from her family, without a partner, without close friends. Every night was a test, and every day a struggle. But she never felt truly alone. She began filling her time by writing a book, a spiritual memoir entitled "Behind My Hijab, There's Light." The book was later published online and read anonymously by hundreds of thousands of people, especially young Chinese who were restlessly searching for direction in their lives. They sent her messages. "I wasn't ready to convert to Islam, but after reading your writing, I'm starting to believe that God exists. I cried reading your story. I thought I was alone. Turns out I wasn't." Meiying began to realize that although she had lost everything worldly, Allah had replaced it with something far greater, an influence that touched the hearts of people she didn't even know. One night, Meiying received an email from a Muslim philanthropist in Malaysia who had read her writing. They offered her the opportunity to perform Hajj, all expenses covered. Meiying wept in prostration that night. "Before, I could only see the Kaaba on my phone screen," she whispered. "Now you invite me personally, O Lord." When she finally arrived in Mecca, dressed in her white ihram, standing before the Kaaba, she was speechless. Only tears flowed freely. "This is the culmination of my long journey. From an atheist lieutenant, I am now your guest, O Allah." Amidst a sea of people, she felt closest to heaven. Upon returning from Hajj, Meiying brought a renewed spirit. She began rallying support from the Muslim community to establish a Mandarin language Islamic school where Muslim children could learn religion, culture, and science without fear or hiding. With the help of foreign donors and the enthusiasm of the local community, she managed to rent an old building and transform it into a small madrasa. She named it Cahaya Timur. Now Meiying is not only a teacher, but also a mother, a sister, and a role model for the children who proudly learn Islam in their mother tongue. After news of Maryam Lin's conversion to Islam spread, it wasn't just her professional life that was shaken. Her personal life was shaken as well. Her extended family, neighbors, childhood friends, all reacted in different ways. Some were disappointed, some angry, and still others quietly distanced themselves. Maryam's father was a retired military officer, a disciplined, strict man who took great pride in traditional Chinese culture and values. From a young age, he instilled in her a sense of pride in her ancestors, culture, and loyalty to her country. To him, Islam was something foreign, even threatening. When he heard that his eldest daughter had converted to Islam and was wearing a hijab, his face turned red with anger. "Whose daughter are you? You're destroying our family's dignity," he shouted when Maryam dared to come home without removing her hijab. Maryam simply lowered her head. She didn't respond angrily. Silently, she prayed that Allah would soften her father's heart. For months, her father refused to speak to her. He refused to eat with her. He forbade other family members from mentioning Maryam's name at the dinner table. To her father, Maryam had betrayed the family identity. Yet Maryam remained faithful in visiting home every month. She brought him his favorite food, tended the backyard garden she had often tended with him, and cleaned her own guest room, even though he never invited her to stay overnight. Her patience gradually softened the atmosphere. Her father stopped chasing her away, though he remained silent. And one night when Maryam returned home late, her father opened the door without a word, a silent confession that his heart was beginning to crack. Her mother was far more emotional than he. When Maryam first declared her Islam, she cried for days. She felt like she had lost the daughter she had been so proud of. "Haven't we given you enough love, Meiying?" her mother asked, holding her daughter's hand. Maryam replied softly, "You were the first love of my life, but now I've also found a love that is limitless, love for God." Every time they met, her mother cried. She couldn't accept Maryam's change, especially as many of the neighbors began whispering. "Her daughter has become strange," they said. "She's wearing a headscarf. She says she's changed her religion," another whispered. However, a mother's love is often stronger than anger or prejudice. Maryam's mother began secretly following her daughter's blog and writings. She read them all through tears, and deep down, she began to understand that Maryam's conversion to Islam wasn't due to confusion or bad influences, but rather to sincerity and a profound search for meaning. One day, her mother asked, "What is Surah Al-Fatiha? I read you often mention it." Maryam hugged her mother and recited the surah slowly. From that day on, her mother no longer objected. She hadn't yet converted to Islam, but she was beginning to see the light in her daughter's life. Her younger brother, Li Wenhao, was initially furious. He felt Maryam had brought shame to the family. He even blocked his sister's number and removed her from the family group. But Wenhao was a quiet, curious young man. He began secretly following Maryam's blog, reading about the meaning of monotheism, Islamic etiquette, and the stories of the Prophet's companions. Unbeknownst to him, his young heart was touched. A few months later, Maryam saw an anonymous account post a comment, "If someone wants to learn Islam secretly, where should they start?" Maryam immediately knew who it was. Wenhao hasn't converted to Islam yet, but he's already started praying on YouTube in his room, and even says "Assalamu alaikum" when he sees Maryam, a small gesture that makes her cry that night. Most of her extended family quietly cut ties. There were no more invitations to family reunions, no birthday greetings. Maryam was considered a disgrace by some. Her cousin even wrote a sarcastic status on social media. Some people are willing to abandon traditions just for the sake of foreign, rootless teachings. But over time, some of them secretly contacted Maryam again with sentences like, "I don't dare speak openly, but I want to know, how does Islam teach patience and peace?" Maryam answered everything with an open heart. She didn't blame or retaliate against past insults. She knew that guidance is God's business, not human. The neighborhood where Maryam lived was initially very tough. She often received cynical stares, and once, children threw rotten orange peels at her, shouting, "Terrorist!" It was a wound she kept to herself, but Maryam didn't retaliate. Instead, she visited her neighbors one by one. She brought them food during Chinese New Year. She greeted everyone who passed by. She politely attended a neighbor's funeral. Over time, the community's perspective changed. They saw that Miriam wasn't radical. In fact, she was more polite and active than before.